Hello, everyone. Alexander Mercurius has been traveling for the past week or two, and I myself is in China traveling into different places. So it was hard for us to find a time that could work for both of us. But we did manage. Yesterday we talked, and then my internet has some issues, so we have to end our conversation earlier. We covered so far the British election, Julian Assange's release, and toward the end of it, a little bit of French election. And we scheduled another time on Monday. So hopefully I can fix my internet problems and have a continue the discussion with him on Monday. But this is what we got so far. And have a look and thank you. My apology for from time to time there is some disconnections and the poor quality of the recording from time to time. My apology. Thank you.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Just so you know, my internet has been on and off a little bit. So if you get disconnected, just
Okay.
try to get, yeah. If it's too much interruption, we'll
Yeah.
just have to finish early. Okay, but let's try.
One of the big changes since Xi Jinping became China's president is that the atmospheric situation in Beijing has transformed. So where it was previously there was a lot of pollution.
Yeah.
That problem, according to him, is gone. It's been solved.
Yeah. Yes, that's how I feel it too. Yeah, for a while it was a lot of anger in the Beijing residents, right? They couldn't see the sky,
Yeah.
those fog, etc. And it's pretty much solved. Yes, you see the blue sky now,
Wow.
despite of BBC's.
You see the blue sky now.
Okay. There, there's many elections. There's many meetings. Okay, so let's start with the British.
Let's start.
Yeah, let's start with the UK election. All right. So I guess on the one hand, it is not much surprise that Labour had a landslide. They got 400 something seats, etc. But I want to ask you, what is the dominant issue for the election that caused the Conservative loss so big?
Right. Well, in my opinion, this election actually has been not perhaps a huge surprise, but nonetheless, it's produced the outcome I expected, only more so, which is that what we're seeing in Britain is a mass rejection by the British people of their entire political class. Now, I think a thing that is very difficult for people who are not British to understand is this very complicated electoral system that we have in Britain, which means that the party that comes first tends to do an awful lot better in terms of the numbers of seats it wins in the parliament than the party that comes second, if the gap between them is fairly close. But of course, the wider the gap gets, the more distorted it becomes. And that can make it seem that a party that's won the election and therefore wins hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of seats is doing very well indeed. In fact, that's not been the case at all. And I'm going to illustrate this by giving you the results of the last 3 elections, showing the numbers of what the Labour Party, which has just won this so-called landslide, achieved. So in 2017, when the party was led by Jeremy Corbyn, Labour won 12.8 million votes. In 2019, when Jeremy Corbyn was still the leader of the Labour Party, it won 10.2 million votes. Now, it lost both of those elections. In this election, which it has just won supposedly with a landslide, it got 9.6 million votes. In other words, its numbers of votes are falling. Labour is a declining party in Britain. What has transformed the situation for Labour and has given us this extraordinary result is that the Conservative Party has collapsed. It's gone from 13.9 million votes in 2019 to 6.8 million in this election. It's been an incredible implosion. It's almost halved. The Conservative vote is almost halved. And that tells you 2 things. Firstly, that there is a mass feeling right across the entire political system and virtually every demographic, except the very old, that the Conservative Party has governed Britain very badly and is responsible for the many problems that are accumulating. But the second is that there is no enthusiasm for the alternative, for the Labour Party. And in fact, the political establishment overall is losing support in Britain. And in fact, turnout, the percentage of people who bothered to vote in Britain, again, 68.8% in 2017, 67.3% in 2019, 59.9% in this election, which is almost, not quite, a post Second World War low. I mean, the British basically feel disgusted with everyone. Now, there are many reasons why, but the basic reason is that life in Britain is getting worse and harder for more and more people. The economy is stagnant, productivity is low, young people don't have a future. There's no way that they can earn enough money to establish themselves successfully and to buy their own homes and set up families. Middle-aged, middle-class people are constantly short of money, many of them heavily in debt. The older people, to some extent, protected. They're the only people who are still voting Conservative, but even they are starting to feel the thing is beginning to get out of control. And in this situation of of decay, if you like, everybody comes up with the issue that they want to say the political class is failing on. So some people say immigration, because we have a lot of people coming to live here. Others say the economy. Others say Brexit. Everybody will give their own reasons. But overall, it's a sense by the British people that their political system isn't working for them anymore and isn't delivering effective government anymore. And there is hardly anyone in Britain today who thinks the situation is going to change. Nobody expects that this new government that we now have is going to turn the situation round or govern in a way that is very different from the government that has just been voted out of power.
But how about the other parties, other than those two, the alternatives? How do they fare this time in the election? What are people? Are people just disappointed with everybody, or are there any sign that somebody might emerge, possibly in the future? Maybe not this time, but there is some sign that possibly can emerge to save the day. Are there any signs?
Well, it's possible. Yeah, I mean there are the first very early signs of this. Now, it's important again to say that the way the British electoral system works is that it preserves the status quo. So it's very, very difficult, almost as difficult as it is in the United States, for a third party to break into the political system. The political system is dominated by three political parties, or has been dominated by three political parties. One is the Conservative Party, which has its origins in the 17th century when Kangxi was emperor of China. I mean, that's how far back it goes. The Liberal Party also is basically a party which has its origins in that same period of time, the 17th century. The Labour Party is more recent. It began to emerge in the late 19th century. So it's very difficult to break this. But you're starting to see parties begin to emerge on the left and on the right. So most of the activity at the moment is on the right. The party that got the third largest number of votes is Reform UK, which is a very right-wing party in its economic thinking, which may not be popular with many people, but which takes a strongly anti-imperialist position on foreign policy. It believes that Britain should work to sort out its own problems, not go after chasing after China, Russia, or all of that. Its leader is Nigel Farage. He has now been elected to the British Parliament. It has only got 4 seats. So even though it polled half the number of votes that the Conservative Party did, the Conservatives get 121 seats and Reform UK gets only 4. This is, again, because of the way the electoral system is purposefully designed to stop outsiders. And then on the left, if you can really call this a left-wing party, I think it's now increasingly clear that the main challenge is going to come from the Green Party, which is a very complex party. Some people in it could be described as left-wing, others are very right-wing, some are very anti-imperialist, others are like the German Greens, signed up fully to the American Atlanticist policies. But anyway, they did fairly well in this election as well. They also got 4 seats, though they polled significantly below Reform UK. Now, with all of the big parties, the Liberals got 70 seats, but only with 12% of the vote. And that means that they actually polled less than Reform UK, which got 4. So just that gives you an idea of how peculiar the system is. In a situation where none of the established parties are popular, and where there is great anger on the part of the British people towards the political system, one has to say that we are perhaps not in a pre-revolutionary situation in Britain, but starting to head towards one, in the sense that it's not impossible that support for the Labour Party is going to collapse, just as it has for the Conservative Party. I can't imagine the Conservative Party recovering from this disaster. But if we do get a collapse of that kind, both by the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, then rather than just expect Reform UK to step in and take over the government, we're probably going to see a huge amount of political chaos in Britain, because the entire structure of the system is basically working to keep parties like that out. So we're in for very uncertain times here.
It sounds a little bit like the U.S. Electoral College. Electoral College is allocated like that. In principle, you can have people have fewer votes but still win the presidency if you get enough Electoral College, and it happened a few times. Actually, I think in 2016, I think Donald Trump had probably 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton. Now, the Electoral College in the U.S., I have a little bit of mixed feeling about it now, because even let's look at it 2016. You can say, okay, Hillary Clinton has 3 million, sounds like a lot of more votes than Trump. But if you just look at California, Hillary Clinton has 3.5 million more votes, which means if we ignore the Electoral College, totally using the number of absolute votes, that means California can override a lot of smaller states, right? So that there's that. But in any event, it's complicated. I can see, and then it doesn't really reflect how people feel about one way or another. So I totally with you on this one. Now, so Keir Starmer is now the official.
Okay, can I just quickly say something? I think you're absolutely right. But remember that the people who created the Electoral College and who drew up the American Constitution were former British citizens and mostly British lawyers. So they copied the British system. Yes. This is something Americans find very difficult to accept, by the way. But there is so much about the American Constitution that is a straight copy of the British. And this is why you have an electoral college that works in that kind of way. It's why the Senate, for example, has 2 senators for each constituency, because this is exactly what used to exist in Britain in the 18th century. So it's not just a chance that these 2 systems are so similar. They were designed to be similar because the people who created the American system, the system that they knew and wanted to copy, was the British one.
And they serve the same purpose. Also, they keep the other parties out. It's easier to keep other parties out. Yeah. And then keep yourself in once you're in there, right? Once you're in the system. Yeah. So yeah, now that makes sense. Yeah. So Keir Starmer now is
exactly.
Yeah. So Keir Starmer is now officially the prime minister now in Britain. He's not that different from Sunak, right? So do you expect anything would be different in terms of foreign policy?
No, I don't.
China policy?
No, I don't actually. I think, if anything, he's going to be not just a continuity Sunak, in other words, continue to be like Sunak. I think all of those things that I oppose and in disagreement with, support for Ukraine, hostility to China, all that, I think he's going to take that even further than Sunak did, because in a strange kind of way, Starmer comes even more from within the British establishment than Sunak did. Sunak is Indian extraction. He's married to the daughter of a billionaire who's an Indian billionaire, not a British one. He's got far more of a cosmopolitan, non-British background than Starmer does. Whereas Starmer has served the British state for a very, very long time. He was first director of the prosecution service here. So he is somebody who's very close to the intelligence community, the police systems, the civil service. He's going to continue the same policies that Sunak did, but with more conviction.
Okay. One more thing is, I was reading that the Birmingham, some people were very unhappy about the result because they are not happy with the Labour Party. I guess Birmingham has a lot of a big Muslim population or something, so they're against the Labour candidate because I guess the Labour in general just more pro-Israel. And I think, is that going to cause any problem for Sunak within his own party?
Yes, it is. Of course, it is. Can I just say, if I were to discuss the British electoral system in detail, we would be here for at least a week. But like the American system, again, it lends itself very much to machine politics, to basically controlling outcomes in individual constituencies. And clearly that's what's happened in Birmingham. So an unpopular MP has been elected who wasn't supported by many of the people. And probably, almost certainly, all kinds of things were done to make sure that it happened that way. So there is going to be opposition within the Labour Party and within government and within British society overall to Starmer's policy on Israel. And it is going to be a problem for him. One of the other unusual aspects of this election was that a very large number of MPs, I think it was about 28, were elected who are not affiliated with any party. And a very high proportion of those were Muslims from constituencies with Muslim voters who are very, very angry about Gaza and about the policy the Labour Party has been following on Gaza.
Okay, talking about elections, hard to change. Joe Biden, the US election. So lots of people, after his debate, there were quite a few people here in China, they were asking me, why, the US must have somebody better than this to, both of them. They're not just talking about Biden, but also many people in China are not particularly happy with Trump either. So people are saying US should have people who are better than this. And they ask me, why they don't. I guess you already answered that question partially. And I personally, what I told them is that in the current system, the established, in particular, if you have already been the president or you are the president, you're incumbent, you have a lot of advantage, like name recognition, that kind of thing, and money, etc. You know, because you already have the donors, etc. Is that part of that too?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you're looking at the machinery of it, if you want an explanation of why it's happening, of why a man who is clearly incapable of governing the United States, I mean, people, by the way, getting this all wrong. They're saying, you know, is he able to defeat Donald Trump in November? And this was the important question. The important question is not whether he's able to defeat Donald Trump in November. It is whether he is able to provide effective government and leadership for the United States. And he clearly isn't. At a time of crisis, the United States is led by an exhausted old man, who no longer has full control of his mind or faculties. But the entire system, as it has been created and developed over decades and centuries, has reached that level where it's very, very difficult to remove him. And the system has also become closed. I'm going to suggest actually to people in China that the best way to understand this, both what's happening in Britain and what is happening in the United States, is to look back at Chinese history and consider what tended to happen when dynasties fell. The last stage of a dynasty where you saw corruption, decay at the center, corrupt officials, and perhaps the man at the center, the Huangdi, the emperor. He might be a child, he might be incompetent, but he was there, and without him being able to govern anymore, everything around him starts to fall apart. And you start to see that. You see that at the end of the Han Dynasty. You see that at the end of the Ming Dynasty. You see this in other periods of dynastic decline. In the United States, in the Anglo-American world, we are now in a period of a very advanced dynastic decline.
Yeah, I also find lots of similar things, like the Ming Dynasty, the end of the Ming Dynasty, and the current U.S. I also find lots of similar things. Like the Ming Dynasty, actually, when when it's decimated, it was a rich dynasty. It wasn't a poor dynasty, but the emperor itself, he himself is very poor.
No?
He was very poor. So the money was not in the government. The money was
Exactly.
concentrated, right? That's what's going on in the U.S. also right now, don't you think?
Yeah. Yes. And we see the same pattern in the United States now. We're some ways very rich, but the political system is in a state of profound decay. And at the center of it, we have a man, a president, who represents all this. And I don't see this changing, actually.
Yeah. So my
Whatever
next
happens
question.
in the election in a few months.
Yeah. Well, you think of the Democratic Party, because once I find the only thing that will force Biden to leave, I mean, he already said he's not. The latest he said he will continue. Okay. So I don't expect him to. His family apparently have discussions, and of course, Hunter Biden would want to see him continue to be the president, etc. But if the donors started to pull money out, which I see some donors already are talking about, the Disneys or some families, when that starts, don't you think there is that possibility the Democratic Party has to do something, has to replace him? Do you think that's still a possibility?
Absolutely. I think that's going to happen. And I think they are. I think the donors are now making it absolutely clear that they've lost confidence and that they want to see him removed. And I think within the next couple of days, probably they will get their way. I don't myself think that there's any way of resisting this. And I'm going to say something else. If the donors are able to force a decision to make Biden step down as candidate, which I think they will, then over the next couple of days, they will also force a decision to having him step down as president as well. Because I can't see how you can tell the American people that this man who can't conduct an election campaign is fit to be president of the United States.
Well, then I don't really like that perspective either, because I'm not sure
No.
Kamala Harris is better than okay. Even though she's, she's
There is
not, yeah, she doesn't have the same problem, but she has her problem. Yeah.
she is a symptom of the way in which the Democratic Party and the entire political establishment has completely mismanaged this whole situation, because she's clearly not someone that the American people have any confidence in and have any real belief in. I don't think anybody does, actually, outside perhaps herself and a few of her friends, because she was put in to basically amend him, ethnically or whatever, in some kind of way. It's difficult to see how, if you get rid of Biden, you can avoid having her. I can't really see any simple solution to this.
Well, who will be replacing him then? Who will have the donor support in your view? Newsom, Gavin Newsom,
Yeah,
Pete.
you see, this is it. I think you can come up with all sorts of names. Newsom is the one everybody talks about. Though I understand that a lot of people don't like him, even in California, let alone the rest of the United States. And you mentioned earlier, the concern a lot of people have about California just dominating the entire political system and the election. So, I mean, he's got that to contend with as well, because you're not the only American, the only person in the United States whom I've heard talk in that way. So he's got that problem. But it's all very well to say, you bring Newsom in, and yes, he's articulate, he's intelligent, he's much younger, he's obviously not senile, but he will have been picked by effectively the donors. And that isn't a very attractive proposition to put to the American people. I mean, it all looks extremely, manipulated and controlled, which of course American politics is, but perhaps not quite in this very open way that this would be. That's why I think myself that Kamala Harris has to be a real possibility here, even if it's one that most Americans and most Democrats don't want, because at least she is in constitutionally the correct position to take over. What is the vice president for, after all, if not to step in when the president isn't able to act?
Yeah. Yeah. Then we will see then. It will be interesting. Yeah. I do think if somebody can push him out, it will be the donors. And once that started, I think it's
Yes,
very hard.
yeah.
It will be hard for him to stay. Yeah.
I think we're there, actually. I think the donors are already making their views clear. I think over the last 36 hours or so, my guess is there's been a lot of private polling, and they've now realized that if they stick with Biden, they're heading to a big defeat in November. And I think the donors are already pulling out and basically saying that he must go. I think Biden himself is resisting it, and some of the people around him are resisting it. But just as you, I think the pressure is going to become irresistible over the next couple of days.
I also want to ask you, Julian Assange, right? That's a great news that he's released. Now, what made them to make that decision? What's your new view? What finally, like, they decided, okay, we need to let him go? Is it just too much pressure, or is there anything else?
The reason they decided to let him go, and I should say I have inside information on this. I mean, some of the people I know are very close to the Assange campaign. I even know a few people in WikiLeaks. The reason they decided to let him go is very simple. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed it on this program. The High Court granted Assange leave to appeal against the decision by the lower courts to approve his extradition to the United States. The terms upon which the High Court granted leave to appeal made it almost certain that in the appeal itself, Assange would have won. And apparently, and I understand that, well, I've been told this by people who've seen the letters, the documents, the British lawyers who were acting for the United States here in Britain in the case advised the US authorities that they expected to lose the appeal and they expected the extradition to be refused. And the United States decided that rather than allow that to happen, they might as well accept this proposal, which apparently the Assange team made a long, long time ago for this plea bargain. So that's why it happened, because they realized that they would lose the appeal.
You see, I don't quite understand why don't they use this opportunity, right? This Assange was released like 1 or 2 days before the debate. Why don't they make this a deal, make this an issue, and saying you see, we just let him go, just drop all the charges. You know, we defended the First Amendment. You, Donald Trump, it was you, Justice Department, who issued the arrest and all that kind of thing. Why don't they make this an issue? This could be an issue that lots of people cares deeply about, right?
Absolutely, and I think that is exactly what they should have done. They should have dropped the entire prosecution. But the problem is, again, they've left it far too late. If Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, as soon as Biden had been elected president, had said straight away, this prosecution is a disgrace, we're not going to be party to something like this, which restricts the freedom of the media in this manner, in this fashion, we're definitely going to drop this case against Julian Assange. Well, that would have been a strong statement, and it would have been one which would have won Biden a great deal of support. But instead, they spent 3 years CIA and the NSA, and I mean, it's another example and corruption and incompetent power in the United States, which is not going to go away.
So the French election, Macron, the first round was Macron lost big time. Okay, so after that, I think all the parties, they decided they have to work together to counter Marine Le Pen. So the second round is on Sunday. It's not expected that her party will get more than half of the seats. That's the now, of course, we don't know for sure, but that's the expectation. So what's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen in the French election?
I think you've summed it up extremely well, which is, again, Marine Le Pen is going to be prevented from getting a majority in the French parliament, even though her party in the first round won 33